This is the third and final recording for the lecture for topic 13, ANOVA. And we left off the last part with a summary table of a one-way ANOVA, which is similar to what SPSS output looks like. So let's look at this. So in this top table, we just have the labels for the three groups of the independent variable in our example type of TV show and the number of people in each of them, right? That's N for each group. Then we have the test of between subjects effects, which is what tells us if our omnibus test is correct, right? This is our sums of squares. And that is the row that corresponds to our independent variable, which is called group. So let's look at this a little bit. All right, this group is in our example TV show, okay? So this is the sums of squared right here, sums of squared between group. And I'll show that in another slide. Degrees of freedom is k minus 1, which is 3 minus 1 is 2. Mean square and our f value, and finally our p value. Okay, SPSS has it under sig for significance. Okay, this is our sums of squared error or within groups here, right? Our mean square error or within, mean square within, our degrees of freedom within, which is n minus 3, n minus the number of groups. N is 176, right? And finally, your total sums of squares total is actually the corrected total right there. Don't worry about the other output for now. So let's be specific. There's a mean square between, mean square within. To calculate f, we would just divide the between by within, and you can see that it equals 6.04, just like in this output, right? That's your sums of square between group. That's your sums of squared error or within group. That's your sums of squared total. Don't worry about the rest of this. But you do need to know that your eta squared, you just divide your sums of squared between group by your sums of squared total, just like in regression. And that corresponds to your R squared that is output right here. Right here. All right. So this was the actual article that resulted from that research published in Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity, and the Arts, right? You can see previous research has shown that award-winning literary fiction leads to increases in performance on tests of theory of mind. So that's another way to talk about social cognition, right? And we mentioned the two separate studies. And right here, this is a primary analysis for the second study. First, we used analysis of variance to compare RMET, that's the eyes test, scores across three groups: drama, documentary, and control. Mean RMET differed across the three groups, F, and then the degrees of freedom in F. This is, let me get a pencil. So this is degrees of freedom between groups, which is k minus 1. This is degrees of freedom within, which is n minus k, right? This is exactly the output that I showed you on the SPSS file, including the eta squared, okay? Pairwise contrast, that's you look next to see if there's any differences between the individual groups, demonstrated that mean RMET for the control group was significantly lower than that of the fiction group, right? RMET scores for the control group also tended to be lower than those in the documentary group, but the difference was not statistically significant. All right, so that is actual real-life use of ANOVA. Okay, and you'll notice right there, all those values are just taken out of that table. So you can have a few more examples from the literature that I actually have from one of my professors from a long time ago, my first psychology statistics professor who studied before he became full-time quantitative psychologist. He studied attitudes towards affirmative action. And you can see in this table, let me get another pen. Okay, so these are all attitudes. So attitudes towards affirmative action quality, okay, different criteria, belief in merit, and so forth. You can see here you have your F value for each comparison. And here there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups. So K equals 6, right? And it tells you how many people are in each group. And it tells you, different means. These subscores here tell you if there's anything with the same subtext is not significantly different. So you can see this 3.5. So quality of affirmative action, it's highest in African-American woman. It's 3.5. There's a D. There's no D in any of the other subscripts here. So this means this is significantly higher than all these other groups, right? It also tells you partial eta squared, which is your effect size for your ANOVA. Here we go. Subscripts reflect analyses addressing which pairs differed, okay? If they don't share a subscript, they differ. You guys don't have to worry about that right now. This is the citation for that. Okay, and a couple more things. Eta squared, I told you. Chi-square, we're going to cover that in 2 weeks. Okay, focuses on categorical variables. And we'll talk about that shortly, right? And here are the results. So the important thing is that the researcher always highlights the important results, the ones that are relevant to the hypotheses and the ones that are bigger and interesting, just to help people understand the whole story, okay, the story of the experiment and the paper. So broadly, these data suggest that African Americans and whites endorse divergent views on most items, and the Asian Americans express views somewhere in between. No real surprise here, right? So if you have any questions, post it in the FAQ or email me.